Ron, who's not only a professional that I highly admire, but somebody that I'm lucky to say that I have a friendship with, because my relationship with him started, I think, back in 2015, and I was lucky enough to test and use some of his magical creations, and I was able to learn so much from him. So I'm really excited. Thank you so much, guys. On my end, I'm a director of photography. I was, prior to that, a loader, AC, camera operator. I worked for some companies as well. I worked years for Leica, then I worked for Zeiss, which I really appreciate those opportunities, because I do think that it helped me a lot. That experience helped me a lot with the work that I do nowadays as a director of photography. I am from São Paulo, Brazil. I originally came to Los Angeles to do my Master of Fine Arts in cinematography at the American Film Institute. And nowadays I am totally based in Los Angeles, which I would like to say again, thank you for this invitation coming from Brazil. It really made me very, very happy. And muito obrigada. I think that's it for me. Let's leave like the time for the master to speak, because he's not only an engineer and an artist, but he's a master in his field.
Well, thank you so much, Thaïs. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be doing this with you today, and thank you to Diogo, and thanks to Raphael and Atelier Bucareste. I appreciate it very much. This is an honor to be speaking on behalf of your wonderful institution. And I will try my very best today to give you some information about filters that you may not have been exposed to before. So my name is Ron Engvaldsen. I am the Director of Manufacturing for Schneider Optics, based out of the United States. Schneider, our parent company, is in New Jersey. Germany. And this is where all the lenses are made. The filters that are made for motion picture and television are actually made in the United States, New York specifically. And I am now currently in my 24th year with Schneider Optics, and I am a degreed chemical engineer by trade. And you know, me and a group of others here have basically built the filter group up from scratch into what it is today, which I believe to be, you know, quite a nice organization, a lot of fine products. We have assisted so many camera and movie productions with our products, and it's something that we're very, very proud of. So I very much look forward to the presentation today, and I'm all set to go.
Okay, Ron, thank you. So I think you have a very interesting and valuable presentation for us. So shall we start?
Sure. You have to enable sharing, please.
Oh, I think Raphael, please, could you let him to share his screen with us?
There we go. Okay. So welcome to the presentation. This is Schneider Kreuznach presentation on motion picture television filters, better known as MPTV filters. These are filters that are specifically used for production of motion picture, television, broadcast type productions. And the first part of the presentation is rather on a technical side, and you know, there will be a question and answer session after the technical part of the presentation, where Diogo will take some questions, and we'll see if we could answer them as best we can. And the second part of the presentation is going to be product related. What does Schneider MPTV filter, what does our catalog offer you as the camera professional? So I'm going to jump right into it. one of the things that I get a lot are the technical questions that come into our company. And by far, the most common question these days is, what is a full spectrum neutral density filter? You may have seen FSND, those letters after a neutral density filter. And again, the most common question is, what does full spectrum really mean? In order to answer the question, there's a little bit of theory that I need to go into so that you could have a full understanding. But FSND stands for full spectrum ND. And I'm going to be giving you a little bit of what's called wave theory. And please, if you're already familiar with this concept, and forgive me that it's overly, fundamental for you, but I found that it's important to have a full understanding, or at least a basic understanding of wave theory before I proceed. So, as you may or not know, light travels in a sine wave pattern, which looks like the sine wave above. And this sine wave actually has a length of one complete cycle of the sine wave, as you can see here from peak to peak, defined by the letter lambda, which is the Greek letter which defines wavelength. As can be seen on this little graph here, this is the length of one wave of light, okay? Again, here it is, Greek letter lambda. So wavelengths are measured in units of length, similar to just about any other length. Meters, centimeters, inches, feet, yards, miles, kilometers. The particular unit of length, as when we talk about light, is measured in a nanometer, abbreviated NM, or 1/1000th of 1 meter. So just imagine you took a meter stick, which is slightly larger than a yardstick, and you sliced it up into 1 billion equal slices of length. One slice is equal to 1 nanometer. Very, very, very small in length, almost pretty much invisible. So now that you understand the term wavelength of light and it being measured in nanometers, we'll be able to discuss just a little bit about what's called the photonic spectrum of light. This is the photonic spectrum of light, which is basically all the different wavelengths of light, starting at the bottom with the shortest wavelengths. You have X-rays, and then you go through ultraviolet light, visible light, near infrared, mid-infrared, and far infrared. The area that we're going to be most concerned with is this visible region here, where light is actually broken up into different colors that humans are able to see. So as you can see here, here's a smaller snip of the light going across, and here's ultraviolet, visible, and near infrared. So digital sensors are sensitive to light from 350 nanometers, which is the very tail end of ultraviolet, right at this point right here, all the way up to 1000 nanometers, which is into the near infrared, the very beginning of the near infrared. So the term full spectrum is defined as light within this range of 350 to 1000 nanometers. Okay, so in summary, a full spectrum ND should attenuate the light equally and evenly throughout this entire range in this bracket that you see down here where it says full spectrum. So the transmission of light at every wavelength from 350 nanometers all the way up to 1000 nanometers, or 1 micron, should absorb light evenly. And that is the true definition of what a full spectrum neutral density filter is. It is the 21st century filter. It's probably the last filter you'll ever need. If I was asked to make a better filter than the full spectrum ND, I would not know where to start. It is pretty much the supreme filter of today's cinematographer. So I'd like to talk to you about the evolution of neutral density. As I stated before, in my 24th year at Schneider, so I've seen pretty much a lot of NDs that have been made out there, and I'm going to discuss the 4 different types and what they mean and what the differences are. And in the next slide, I'm going to show you on a spectrogram what exactly I'm talking about. So in the very olden days, neutral densities were made with a coating called Inconel, and it was a very, very neutral coating. But the reason why they fell out of popularity is because the filters were very highly reflective, almost like looking at yourself in a mirror in the morning when you're combing your hair. And high reflections are not a very good thing for various reasons. I'm sure the likes of Diogo and Thaïs could expand on why highly reflective optics in the map box are not a good thing. So next came the film NDs, which have been made, through the 1960s, 70s, all the way, still being made today. And, I call them film NDs because they were basically made and acceptable for film. They are made with organic dyes in various mixtures. And the hope is that you're going to get a nice gray color out of it, which means even attenuation throughout the red, green, and blue. The problem with those is you can get a little bit of color variation from one lot to the next, for one density to the next. And, many camera professionals found the need to do more frequent light balancing, which is not something that you so much want to do on set. So as a solution, NDs are kind of handpicked so that if you went to your rental house and said, I need a set of neutral densities, they would lay them out on a light box and you would say, okay, I'll take those 2 NDs and I'll take those 2. They look like they belong together, and you pick a family of NDs. It's not optimal, but for the longest time, this is, from all manufacturers, this is the only option available to us. So along comes 2011, and the CMOS sensor is born in digital cameras, and we have this phenomenon called IR pollution. Film never saw infrared light, didn't see it, didn't care, never showed up. However, on the digital sensor, very, very sensitive to infrared light. So then the IRND, or infrared neutral density filter, is born, and also made with organic dyes. Some of the dyes absorb infrared light. Some of the issues with those is some color variation because you still were working with dyes, and they were also very, very expensive to make. But in 2012, Schneider was awarded a Technical Achievement Emmy for having produced the infrared ND, better known as the Platinum IRND. Which the Television Academy found this to be award-worthy. So that was quite a moment to receive such an award, but it solved a whole lot of problems with digital photography. And then comes the full spectrum ND. The camera manufacturers realized what the problems were with infrared, so they started to solve the problem in camera by means of putting an OLPF, an optical low pass filter, on the sensor, which absorbed that infrared light. So the full spectrum ND is the next filter, and it is being used. It's a different type of filter. It's not made with dyes. It's made with coatings, vacuum deposited coatings, not all that dissimilar from the coating on your lens. The anti-reflection coating that you'll see on the front of your lens. Same exact technique, only the chemistry is a lot different in order to wind up with a coating that is near perfect neutral filter. When when you talk about NDs, neutrality is the primary function. It's very important that light come in to the filter and leave the filter without any bias toward any of the colors that we all know very well. These are very repeatable. They are expensive. The coating process is quite expensive to do, but the results are second to none. And I'm going to show you in a little bit more detail why it is they're so good. Before I do that, I'm going to discuss the 4 different NDs. This is what's called a spectrogram, and the y-axis is percent transmission, or light passing through the filter, and the x-axis is uses the wavelength in nanometers. So down below, you've seen just to illustrate what the colors really are. You have blue, and you have your green, you have your red, and then you have the yellow, the cyan, and you know, the colors that we can see with our eyeballs. So if you look at the reflective ND as made, you know, many years ago, you can see that the curve or the response of this filter is quite flat. However, it isn't perfectly neutral, because you could see this cyan colored line here, how it sits closer to 10% over at 700, but down at 400, it's closer to 15. So what this means is the response of the filter actually slopes and favors the blue and the green, and not so much the yellows and the reds. So this leads to a filter that is not completely neutral. However, back then it was the best neutral that was available, as long as you could deal with the challenges of this high reflection. In some cases, you know, 80% of the light would actually reflect right off of the surface, just like a mirror. So if you look at the red line here, and these are all ND.9s, by the way, which theoretically are 12.5% transmission. We'll go into this a little bit later as to what this means. So the ND9 that was made for film, this red line, you can see how it's fairly flat. You know, it dips a little bit here at the red, which never really mattered that much. But what's important to see is, as you start to approach infrared, which is down in this region here, the filter passes a lot of this light. So there's a lot of high transmission of what we call far red light or near infrared light. And this was the reason why this type of filter never worked on a CMOS sensor. Just way too much infrared transmission coming through the filter. And that it was introduced to an image which was black, say like a black tuxedo, and the tuxedo looks brown or magenta or, you know, maroon colored. I'm sure many of you have seen examples of this. So the solution to that back in 2011 was the IRND, which is the green spectrum here. Now, this is an example of an IR that's slightly lighter than it's supposed to be. I did this for a reason, because I didn't want it to sit with all these other lines, because it would just be a mishmash confusion. So I found one that was slightly higher so that you could see what the IRND looks like. So it's a relatively flat. It has these 2 humps here, but they sort of off each other and give you a fairly neutral filter. But more interesting, if you look down past the 620 nanometer point, you could see how the light tends to trail down, and this would continue right into the infrared. So this filter is basically a gray filter, but it has very high absorption of infrared light. And now, last but not least, you have the full spectrum ND, which is in black, and this is an actual spectrogram of a Schneider full spectrum ND called a rhodium, which we'll talk more about in a moment as well. And you could see how it's basically just flat response all the way across. So if you remember the definition of neutrality, it's even absorption across all wavelengths. So you could see how this is going to be a very neutral filter that has no color bias whatsoever throughout any of these wavelengths. So I spoke a moment ago about transmission and density. I did want to just introduce a couple of formulas here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there are times, at least in my business, when you know what the optical density is, like an ND 0.3, a 0.6, a 0.9, a 1.2, that's the density. And you need to calculate transmission. These formulas allow you to do that. And if you want to start comparing the density value of an ND to f-stops on a lens, this formula down on the bottom here is how you would do that. So the density divided by 0.3 is a way to calculate the number of stops. So for example, an ND 0.6, we all know is a 2-stop ND. You know, an ND 0.6 divided by 0.3, you know, would give you 2, which is 2 stops. This is an expansion of that. I created this chart because I do plan on making this presentation public. So, you know, anyone could look at it, and, you know, maybe there's some pages that you'd like to print and keep them as, you know, what we call cheat sheets. So this is those 3 formulas only broken down into actual numerical values. So a half-stop ND, which is an ND 0.15, will give you 70% transmission, and there's a half-stop. And then you have the regular 1-stop increments, you know, 0.3, 0.6, 0.9, all the way down, and the corresponding transmissions, and then the corresponding stop loss values. And one thing that you'll notice is neutral density. Optical density is a linear function. As you could see, as the stops increase by 1, the densities are linear in relationship. However, the transmission isn't. It's at a logarithmic format. So you could see 50% in 25, and it keeps halving all the way down until you hit the point where there's very little light going through. So this is just a handy chart that I keep handy, and it makes it a good little guide for you instead of having to run through the formulas. Excuse me. So how do you test for neutral density filters? You know, I could show you a spectrogram as I did before, and you can see the line is basically flat. But that really isn't good enough, though. There's 2 other methods that are more efficient and more detailed and more appropriate for testing neutrality of the filters. Excuse me. The first one is called end-to-end testing by use of vector scope. For those that have been on the set of TV or movie, I'm sure you've seen a vector scope. It's a very commonly used item and a great tool for cinematographers. As a matter of fact, many of the monitors I see these days on sets actually have built-in vector scopes. So why is a vector scope important? Well, it's important, and the end-to-end testing part of it means light goes actually through the filter and then through the lens, into the sensor, through the electronics of the camera, and out to the monitor. So this is how the filter is actually used, if you think of it, when you put a filter in your map box. So this is how it should be tested as well, with all of these considerations involved. So for those of you that know this, it's a basic fundamental chart. Those of you that don't, this is what a vector scope display looks like. And you can see the colors on the vector scope as you go around this chart. You have your 3 primary colors, which are red, blue, and green. And then you have the secondary colors or complementary colors, which are yellow, magenta, and cyan. For better illustration, you could actually see the colors here as we can go around this chart here. So, you know, blue sits, you know, just below 3 o'clock, you know, as it does here. and green sits at like 7 o'clock. So this is what it looks like with actual color. So how would you set up a test like this? This is an apparatus that I set up 2 years ago at one of our trade shows, and it's a very simple setup. You have a camera, any ordinary camera with hopefully a tight lens, so that it can only see this 18% gray card, and this is a calibrated neutral 18% card, okay? And then the information comes out of the camera and goes into the vector scope. Now, in this case, I have a what's called an ultrascope. It's a smaller, lighter, more inexpensive version of a vector scope. It's a little hard to see on my computer screen, but you can see the RGB, or red, green, blue parade. This is the actual response of these three colors. But the information comes out into a vector scope, and it will read the 6 colors: red, blue, green, cyan, yellow, and magenta. Okay. So this is an example of what it would look like on an actual vector scope, and there are your colors again. You have the red, the blue, the green, the yellow, the magenta, and the cyan, and in the middle is our target. Okay, this little square right here is considered our target for neutrality. And this burst of light that you see here is basically the signal coming from the camera into the vector scope. And it's actually being read on the vector scope as these 6 different colors. And the goal here is to have the signal land dead set in the middle. That means a total equality of red, green, and blue, yellow, cyan, and magenta, which is what we're looking at right here. So this one happens to be right dead set in the middle because there's no filter in place. Okay, so the next step is to put a filter in front of the lens and see what happens to the signal. If the signal moves a little bit, then that means there's some sort of effect from one of the 6 colors. Okay, if the signal doesn't move, then that means it's a completely unbiased response of that signal coming through the filter, through the sensor, through the lens, through the electronics, and into this vector scope. Now, there's one thing that's important to note here. This is really important. And I'm going to go and show you some results as our rhodium full spectrum NDs have actually been tested on 2 different cameras. But the real important thing I want to show you here is when we initially did this test, we had the gain set on ×1, and we went through and put all the filters in front of the camera only to see no movement in the signal. So we're kind of wondering, is it broken? What's going wrong with the test? And it so turns out that the signal was moving a little bit, but you just couldn't see it. So what we did in all of our testing is we turned the gain up to 5x. Okay, so in essence, what you're seeing here is 5 times the error or the shift of the color. So I'm going to run through the different densities. Now the rhodium are available in 10 different densities, and I'm going to show you test results of all of them. And this test is a supreme judge for neutrality because this is what would actually be seen by the sensor and recorded into your imagery. So again, this is no filter here. And you can see the center burst is calibrated dead center. So as I go to the next slide, I'm going to run through, this is the ND.3, which is the lightest. Again, all ×5, okay? And you can see this is the 0.3, the 0.6, the 0.9, and the 1.2 is probably the closest thing I've seen to a perfect neutral and it's very, very hard to make a perfect neutral, almost impossible. So you might look at this and say, okay, well, I do see a little bit of a shift. It was dead center before with no filter. And this is just a tiny little bit of shift toward the red, but just remember, this is 5 times the error, and we're still sitting within our target here. So this basically makes what we call an imperceivable color shift. So as we continue through 3, 6, 9, 1.2, and we go to the 1.5, 1.8, 2.1, 2.4, 2.7, and finally our 10 stop ND 3.0. So the question that I get a lot is, have you considered trying this on different cameras? Maybe these only function very well on the ARRI and maybe not some other camera. So to continue on, we've tested on a red helium, 5600K. Again, here's your calibrated, no filter, again, gain times 5. So we looked at ARRI, so now we're going to look at some results on the red camera. 0.3, 6, 9, 1.2, 1.5, 1.8, 2.1, 2.4, and 2.7, 3.0. So while your signal does seem to move around a little bit, as I stated, there's no such thing as a perfect neutral. But I think this is the closest that I've seen of a filter out there on the market. And this is a filter that you can stack all you want. You can put it on a 6-camera shoot and not see a difference from one camera to the next. No need whatsoever for white balancing, especially in between filter changes. It saves a lot of money in post-production. Thaïs, do you think you could maybe chime in and explain why you think it's important as a cinematographer, not to have neutral densities that are all different colors?
Sure. I think that everybody. Oh, so sorry. Let me stop something here. Doing myself twice. Okay. So I'm sorry about that. I think that all of us who work with filters in the field and not only are testing them, we are quite aware of something that Ron was talking about, like how neutrality is actually the idea of even absorption of all wavelengths. But what we encounter so many times is that filters are not consistent, and we want consistency in our color temperature. And I think that the idea that everything is fixable in post is a very tricky one, because if you have the option, if you have the tools available to make your life easier, to save time, money on set with something that will guarantee consistency in your color, you have no color shift for multi-camera shooting, or you can, if you're gonna stack anything, if you're gonna stack NDs, if you're gonna stack filters, I think it's important to guarantee that you have something that is not giving interference on your image, because when something in front of your sensor, you want to modify your image, but you don't want interference. You don't want something that it's not the reason why you're putting that filter in there, you're putting that lens, you want the cleanest image possible, and doing only the reason why you're putting that device in there. I think that we are quite aware of, many times we go to a rental house and we have to test NDs, for example, and try to find the families, try to find the different densities that will have the closest color shift to one another. And we end up mixing and matching from different sets just to guarantee that we don't encounter aberration later on or on set. So I think that it's incredibly important that we're being presented with a tool that cuts off the amount of headache that you're going to have prior to shooting, and can deliver something that is extremely difficult. You were showing the 10 stops, the ND3. It's extremely difficult to have something that is actually that neutral. So this is great improvement, and it ends up, this test just show that this is a tool that's on our side, saving us time and money on prep, on set, and why not take advantage of something that's already available to us?
Well said.
Yeah, I agree with Thaïs too. Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Thaïs because as a camera assistant, we always, well, I've been shooting a lot of TV series, and all of them with 2 or 3 and specific days with more than 3 cameras. And it's very difficult. It's a very tricky point because it's very difficult to find the same ND filters in a camera rental house for a good matching in all cameras. So this is a very important topic because, well, I have never been able to use this rhodium FS-ND, and I think this is a masterpiece for us because this is a very tricky situation.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Because when the complaints about neutral densities come in, they go right to my desk. So it's hard for me to turn off my phone. So I have to answer these. And you know, this really is a solution to the problem. You know, I do all of the testing myself as they come in by the hundreds, and I must say, filter to filter, density to density. You know, these are not picked, you know, to be the best. They all look like this. So another thing that I get a lot too is, you know, we're doing an outdoor shoot and we're using a graduated ND, and if I'm mixing one camera with a solid ND and another camera with a graduated ND, why the colors look different? So that's important, you know, to know that we do have a solution for that. The rhodiums also come in a graduated, which I'll touch on in a few moments, which are color matched to each other. So if you're on a 3-camera shoot and one's got a solid rhodium because it's not really looking at the sky, and you know, the other 2 cameras are looking at the sky, there's no issues with, you know, with different levels of neutrality. They are all going to match because they're basically all made the same way. The formulation is exactly the same from one to the next. All that differs is the variance of the layers of the coating. So it's really quite an impressive filter, and I'd like to just move on and thank you, Thaïs and Diogo. I couldn't give you firsthand explanations. You know, I'm not normally behind the camera, so thank you for that. So this is an illustration of the neutral density filters as they were shot by a gentleman named Phil Holland, who is a cinematographer from Los Angeles. He's very, very talented and ultra technical type of a guy. And what he did was he photographed all of the rhodiums in all 10 densities with this this model and, you know, a color chart and gray chart. And you can see up in this corner here, this is clear, no filter. And then you have the FSND 0.3, 0.6, 9, 12, 15, all the way to 3.0. And if you to look at you know, the gray chart on every one of these, it would kind of be difficult to bounce your eyeball back and forth from the clear to, say, over here. So what Phil did was he took a snip of the gray chart and he tiled them across. So you can actually see the 3 different values of gray in the clear, in the 0.3 all the way to the 3.0. And I was actually amazed that it would be this good. across all 10 densities with these 3 levels of gray. So this is a really, really good illustration, a more pragmatic and fundamental demonstration of neutrality, rather than the technicalities of vector scope and what I'm going to talk about next, which is a pretty novel way of measuring neutrality that isn't really done really at any other manufacturer. So this is what's called the CIE 1931 color chart. And I learned about this chart. I first saw it, 24 years ago and had no clue as to what it meant or what it did. But in this triangle are all the colors that can be seen by an ordinary color monitor. And if you look in the center here, this is what we call the neutral zone. This is where all of the colors of light come together to yield neutral light. So D6500 is a point that sits in the neutral zone, the northern part of the neutral zone. And the spectrophotometer that I have back at the office is calibrated for 6500. So to get a little bit of a better look at this, I expanded this here, and there's D6500, and you can see how it sits in an area of white light, okay? So just remember that target, D6500. Also, this point here is not just the color to me. On this chart, there are no colors. There's no reds and greens and blues and yellows. There's actually XY coordinates. There's your x-axis and there's your y-axis. So if you take the coordinate, the XY coordinate, it's going to land you somewhere in this color chart. This is what's important to me is, not that a color is red or green or chartreuse or magenta. Those things really have no meaning. XY is what really matters to me. So here's the CIE 1931 again, a little bit different. And what you'll see in this neutral zone in the middle, that very tiny ellipse, this is my target for neutrality. So every filter has to go through and land inside of this ellipse in order for me to consider it neutral and let it go out the door. It's a little small to see, so I kind of expanded it here, and you can see this ellipse. That's my target for neutrality. Okay, and you'll notice that every single part of this ellipse lies within white light. Okay. So this is a different example, a different look at the ellipse, and you could see this is the same ellipse that I just showed you on the previous slide. Okay, it's just a little bit larger. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to plot things into it if it was just too small. And this ellipse is what's known as a modified McAdam ellipse. D.L. McAdam is a person, a color scientist, who developed the McAdam ellipse system. And the way it works is these various ellipses through the color chart have significance, and it's a way of tolerancing a color. So for instance, right in the dead center of this ellipse, there's a color. It's some green. Everything inside of the ellipse has the same green in it, and any difference from the outside to the inside is imperceivable. Okay, well, that's the same concept here, only if you look at this ellipse here in the neutral zone, does that look a little familiar to you? This is actually my ellipse, only I modified it just a little bit. So going back to the slide here, remember D6500? This is my point of perfect neutrality. So there's D65 right here, this pink dot. And that's a coordinate of 313, 329. X equals 313 and Y equals 329. That's dead neutral. That is the target that I'm trying to hit on every filter. Do you hit it? No. Like I said, there's no perfect neutral. But this is a listing of all of the 10 rhodium full spectrum NDs. Here they are with their various colors and where they sit in this ellipse. Okay, now I've had people look at this and say, oh, well, you know, the 2.7 is so far away from what neutral is supposed to be. And the 3.0 is so far away from what neutral is supposed to be. You have to put this ellipse in perspective. It is just that small. Okay. It just happens to look much larger in my illustration because I'm trying to plot 10 different neutrals into it. So that's important to know, and putting color into an XY coordinate is the absolute best way of accurately measuring neutrality. It's basically the same as what a vector scope does, only it's more quantitative. It's more numerical than just a visual, you know, is my center burst moving left, right, up, down? You know, this is an actual plotting of the actual color itself. And I found it to be the absolute best way to measure neutrality. We've been talking about solid neutrals all along. You know, last year, Schneider rolled out the graduated rhodium, which I will be showing you pictures of in the second half of the segment. And you could see the same exact ellipse, same tolerance, and you could see where the colors all land, like yellow are the 0.3s. It's actually right on under the green. And then the greens are the 0.6s, the blues are the 0.9s, the red ones are the 1.2s, and the 1.5s are in purple. So this is a nice grouping, again, putting into perspective how small this ellipse really is. And I repeat myself there because I don't want any misconceptions as to why do they look like they're all over the place. You know, are my grays going to be all over the place? You know, am I going to have 5 cameras with 5 different colors? And the answer is no. This is the finest neutral that I've seen. So this ends the technical part of this session. So I'd like to see if we could open this up for questions, and if there should happen to be any. So I think I'll turn this over to Diogo.
One of the topics and questions that comes to my mind is, as we have new sensors and new technology coming up almost every 6 months, how is the research on the usage of specific filters from NDs or diffusion filters or color filters, that how is this research in sensors that changes their technology so fast? How do you see the evolution of the technology of the sensors as an optical specialist, and how is this research all about?
Well, it sounded like you had 2 different categories there. You know, you say all different filters. From a purpose of neutrality, light is light. Light hasn't changed, you know, since it first came around when the Earth was born. So light entering into a camera, you know, through a lens, is never going to change. How light is processed, however, will. And but still, the main factor is light coming into a camera can only be altered after the fact, not before the fact. Okay, so as you know, your pixel theory, you know, may change over time. I'm sure it will change. You know, we'll adapt to that. You know, we've had to adapt already. You know, when the digital cameras came out, you know, we realized that, you know, light was being processed differently. There could be another change. I don't know how it would be a change for the better. I do see lots of influence on infrared photography. We're already doing it. There are some cameras out there with removable low pass filters, and there's actually, you know, features that are being, you know, shot specifically in infrared I've been involved with a couple of them. So as the processing change, we will have to adapt. Now, as far as diffusion is concerned, this is a quite different topic. How light is processed through a diffusion filter into the sensor is changing wildly, it seems, and there's many factors that could also change it quite a bit. With the number one being focal length. Anyone's ever used a diffusion filter knows that it is very, very highly focal length sensitive. If you had a really long lens and a really short lens and a medium lens, they're not all going to take the same filter.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah, it's going to be different across the board. So the technology will continue to change, and if we want to continue to make state-of-the-art products, then the R&D must continue, and I don't see it ever stopping.
I
Okay.
have a question for
Yes,
you,
go
Ron.
ahead, Thaïs.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. You do such extensive checking and with the filters, and what is the process you have with when you have to test the first batch of, let's say, this amazing NDs? How do you approach the cinematographers? What's the feedback that you get? How does the process work with getting the first test to the DPs, and how do you increment or retest based on the feedback that you have for the usage on the field?
Sure. In New York, where I live, like an hour on the train puts me into New York City in Manhattan, where there are probably 16 to 18 rental houses that I frequent because they know me and they know they could reach out to me for technical support. So I can walk into one of these places with a brand new filter and say, let's get it up on camera and let's pull out a vector scope or a waveform monitor, or let's have a model sit in front of the camera and let's see what it does to her face. Does it smooth out the wrinkles? Does it put her eyeballs out of focus, or whatever the case may be? That there's always people, both on both coasts, New York and California, that we can reach out to, and we rely very heavily on them to send them a filter and say, hey, this just came out of the laboratory this morning and we think it's pretty cool. Can you put it up on camera? What does it do? Is it good? Is it garbage? Tell me. I'll be honest. And I've had lots of cases where someone would honestly tell me, I could see using this once a year, and you might sell 10, in the next 5 years. And it's kind of cool, but is it going to be the next greatest thing? No, it's not. But in other cases, yeah, you do get someone that says, look, these neutrals are phenomenal, or this new diffusion filter that you just developed. It gives a wonderful softening to the skin, that we've never seen before. And, this is how filters are basically born. So, we don't really have the gear in our factory, in our facility to be able to put it up on camera and start measuring resolution and contrast and flare and putting those into numbers. We just don't have the equipment for that. So we rely on the people that do. And, we have people that are just happy to see the next filter. And, once a filter goes into production, it's up to our manufacturing team to make sure that it's cataloged and documented and the procedures are followed. Diffusion filters are a little bit on the difficult side because one strength tends to be very close to the next. So if you're using a 1/4 strength and then you switch over to a half, and if you were to look at the two of them side by side with your eyes, you'd say, okay, well, that one looks a little bit heavier, but I can't really tell. The camera can tell, but can your eye tell? sometimes not. So we need procedures that can allow repetitious production of these so that you get the same thing over and over again. Most everyone has heard of Hollywood black magic. And this is a filter that has lenslets in between the glass. It's a micro lens. This lens is applied using a robot, that we had specifically designed for us, so that we know that this lenslet pattern will be the same every day, every week, every month for years and years. And we're using the same robot program that we used 15 years ago. There was never any reason to change it. So, that staves off the question, how do you know you can make the same thing, for years and years? And, I have your Hollywood one and it looks like your quarter. Why is that? It eliminates these kind of problems. So just to summarize, we rely very heavily on camera professionals to tell us, this is good, this is not good, this is great, this is garbage. And as far as what to do going forward, we have testing methods that that allow us to quantify the filters. But it isn't anything like putting it on camera. It's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah. Well, just for you to know, Hollywood Black Magic is a very famous filter here down in Brazil, here down south.
Mm.
And as a curiosity, could you tell us how old is this filter? I think not everybody knows how old this filter is.
Hollywood Black Magic was actually born in 2007. 2001, we made our first filter with lenslets, and it was called the Classic Soft. The Hollywood Black Magic came later, and it has revolutionized digital cinematography. It is one of the best ways. There's many filters that cut out the video edge and soften the image, but this is really one of the few filters that actually can make digital look like film, depending on the strength that you use.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a brand new filter, so.
Oh no, it's been around for quite a while.
Yeah, 13 years.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, well, I'm gonna say from my head, sometimes we think, oh, this is a new filter, this is a good filter. No, it's 13 years old, so we have a lot of new technology coming up.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the Hollywood Black Magic still remains to be, the most preferred Schneider filter. And I look at the sales of it, and I have to manufacture it and make sure that it's made properly. It's one of my jobs. So, we're making this all the time. Schneider has quite an extensive list of diffusion filters, but you make them, once a month or once every 2 months, and it usually gets you enough to get you by. Hollywoods are always being made. It just never stops to keep up with the demand.
Nice.
Yep.
Shall we continue? I would ask for our audience to send more questions for us, and we will stop again at the end of the presentation for more questions. And I would ask Ron, could you continue, please?
Sure. I'm actually seeing a question.
Oh yeah, we have a few of them.
Yeah, there's a few of them. I don't know, how much time we're going to have to do that, but one of them, it's an anonymous attendee, says, how do fusion filters I think it means differ on focal length.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we covered this before. Just as an example, I was invited to one of our local news stations in New York City, and they were trying to put diffusion filters, Hollywood Black Magic, you know, for instance, on 3 different cameras, but they were all 3 different focal lengths. And, you know, the camera operator didn't understand why he couldn't put the same filter on each lens. So, you know, I told him about a new diffusion filter called Radiant Soft, which is gaining popularity every day. And I brought them into the city and I set up the cameras for him, and I had 3 different filters on 3 different lenses. And, you know, they were just so surprised as to how nice it looked and how it toned down, you know, that sharp video look. So that, I think, is a very, very good answer to that. So what I'd like to do, well, there's often an awful lot of questions here that I would really like to answer, but I think it'll just push us, you know, into running too late.
Yeah, we still have 1 hour in the webinar, so
Yeah.
I think we should continue on your presentation, and
Okay.
then lately we'll answer the questions.
Yeah.
But
All right,
thanks
so,
for everyone, and keep sending us the questions.
oh, you bet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move into the next segment of the presentation, which is actually product related. So the second part of the presentation is specifically filters for cinematography and television. Clear ultraviolet filters. These are standard staple filters that, you know, everyone uses. Diffusion filters used to alter the image in a nice softening way in most cases, or lower contrast, or create flare. Infrared reflecting and absorbing filters. These are filters that specifically absorb infrared and no other part of the visible spectrum. So it's basically a clear filter that absorbs infrared, better known as a hot mirror. Schneider calls it a true cut, which will be in future slides. NDs, ND grads, polarizing filters, close-up or diopters, and special effect filters. So a little bit about how our filters are constructed. When we first set out to make optical filters, we thought it really important as an optical company. Our parent company in Germany had a lot to say about motion picture television filter manufacturing. You know, they wanted a superior product because it had the Schneider name on it, and they felt that it was important to support the representation of quality as the name Schneider has since 1913. So all of our filters are made with water white glass. We do not use any soda lime green window glass. This is all optical grade water white glass. All the filters have a black epoxy edge seal around the edges to protect the filter, you know, from delamination. It makes it a lot nicer to hold, prevents light from flaring in from the sides. We use very high efficiency polarizers. I'll touch on polarizers in a moment, and filters for all formats. And the filters are all water jet cut. We have a very powerful water jet that slices right through the glass. And again, we've been using the same programs for the water jet since we bought it 20 years ago. This way, the filters are always the same size, and you know, we never get complaints that my filters don't fit in the map box, or you know, complaints like that, because the filters are always going to be the same size day after day. So why use filters? In today's day and age, many camera professionals or you know, directors or producers might be content using post-processing instead of filtration. And I think just about anybody that goes behind the camera will say that's normally not a good idea. You want to have control over your image. I met with a DP right before the virus issue, and he said he spent about 10 days on a documentary, and he wanted it to have a certain look. So he used very special filtration, and he changed his filters as the scene changed, and was so disappointed when he finally got to see the end of it because it looked nothing like he hoped. So, you know, what they did was they post-processed out a lot of the things that he wanted to see in the image, which is a disappointment for a camera person or a cinematographer, because, you know, when you're spending the time to develop a look, an organic look, with your tool bag that you have with you, and only to find out that the end result is so severely changed, it can turn out to be a disappointment. There are also some things that you absolutely cannot do in post-production. Proper diffusion, exposure, polarization is one. I've never seen anybody do any post-processing and be able to knock out glare on water or on a car windshield. It's a better idea to use filters right up front at acquisition so that you can actually see right then and then in your dailies what kind of an image you're going to wind up with. So the filters are kind of made three different ways. You know, the clear optical flats and the IR absorbing filters are made with solid substrates. This is just a solid piece of glass that has some kind of a coating on it, which will, number one, protect the lens. A clear optical flat is just a sacrificial piece of glass you put in front of a lens in case you're shooting in a volatile situation. You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger is running through the fire and there's stuff shooting all over the place and rocks coming at your camera. So an optical flat, it just basically protects the lens. It has no other function. And then you have your IR cut filters if you want to knock out infrared in the older CMOS cameras. The other filters that we make are all laminated. We praise, you know, the fact that we put the effect of the filter in between the glass, so you know, so the filters can stand the test of time. Filters that have an effect, whether it be an ND coating or some diffusive component that sit on the surface of the filter, will never survive. Our primary focus for making filters is into the rental market. And in the rental market, the filters are just abused. And it's the reason why we like to have laminated filters so that anything going on with the filter takes place in between the glass, not on the outside. So protective filters, you know, are very common. There are many rental houses that won't let an expensive prime go out unless you put, excuse me, too much talking. So the lens can't go out unless they know it's going to be protected. So optical flats are just a staple in the rental house. They do have an anti-reflection coating on them just to prevent any stray reflections. And another common filter, probably the most common filter, is an ultraviolet absorbing filter. If you're shooting through a lot of atmosphere, it'll reduce the haze in your atmosphere. So we talked about neutral densities before. This is the more inexpensive, what I call film ND. This is the Schneider offering, excuse me. This is the Schneider offering from 1 to 8 stops, as you'll know, for use or exposure and depth of field control. So this is an example. It's a very fundamental picture. I would imagine most people watching this understand this, but just in case, controlling depth of field, neutral density is important as you open and close the iris and change depth of field. So this is a picture with filter and without filter. And you can see on the right side how the background has been thrown out of focus, minimal depth of field by opening the iris. And the way to accomplish that and maintain exposure is by using an ND filter. So we talked about rhodium full spectrum ND. There's the family of 10, attenuating light evenly throughout the near infrared and the visible spectrum. Vector scope and tristimulus tested, available in 10 stops. Rhodium graduated filters, complement to the rhodium solid, attenuate the background without affecting the foreground, available in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stops, or ND 0.3, 0.6, 0.9, 1.2, and 1.5. Available in the horizontal 4x5 orientation or 6.6 square. In 2 different gradients, soft edge, most common for just about everything, a hard edge for longer lenses. And there's a picture of the family. So you could see on the left side the soft edges, and on the right side a more abrupt hard edge transition. It took probably a year to develop these to get the transitions just the way I wanted them. You could see on the left side how the transition is very, very soft and gentle, how it goes from clear to gray. And on most lenses, you'll be able to bury this transition without seeing any lines or any dark banding going across. So this is an example of with and without ND grad. So, you know, again, very fundamental. Why do you need an ND grad? On the left side, you can see without the filter, you know, the exposure is looking at the sky and seeing a lot of available light. So as a result, you know, your foreground, you know, isn't quite as defined, and you're also losing definition in your background. So with the filter in place, you can actually see how darkening the sky brings the mountains and the snow to life. And also you can see the blue popping out of the sky. So ND grads are a very important part of the kit if you're shooting landscapes. And again, the full spectrum ND grads are a match to the solids. So camera to camera, filter to filter, you will not see a color shift. These are the different configurations of the filters that we do make. Many of the colors that we have, you know, they come in a vertical orientation or a horizontal orientation, or what we call the attenuator, which is actually a density wedge, starting from light going to heavy at the top. And these are also available in a horizontal orientation as well. So I discussed TrueCut. This is an infrared absorbing filter. So it's basically just a solid piece of glass with a coating that will absorb infrared in various levels. The TrueCut 680 absorbs 50% of the light at 680, and basically everything else above it just shuts it down. 715 and 750 are the other 2 choices. The other early Sony cameras really like the 680, while the Red like the 750. The 715 is a good middle of the road if you just want to generally block out infrared. So Schneider's polarizing filters have been right at the forefront ever since when we started making filters. We tried really hard to find a filter, a polarizing film that was very, very efficient while neutral as well. A lot of polarizers that you might see have a greenish tint to it, which is kind of normal. Most polarizing film does look like that. True pole filters are more on the gray side instead of the grayish green. So they do quite nicely act as neutral density filters. They're not full spectrum neutral, but it's the closest that I've seen to it being neutral. And Schneider's the only manufacturer that offers polarization in many different flavors. We have the one-stop pole if you're in a low light situation and you don't want to give up the 1.5 stops worth of compensation. The 1.5 is just the standard polarizer that we've been using, you know, for 20 years. And we've actually taken it to the next level with 3, 4, and 5 stop circular polarizers. So if you're in a situation where you need polarization, you're shooting on a lake and you need lots of ND because there's a lot of available light, but you want to knock down the glare on the water, this is where the heavier circular polarizers come in handy. You know, you could stack an ND on top of a polarizer, or the other way around is recommended. Polarizer should always go on the outside. You could do that, but this is 2 filters in 1, so these have been pretty popular. So this is an illustration of polarization, which is a very much misunderstood technology. So what you're looking at here is a person holding one end of the rope, and the other end of the rope is tied to a stake. So as the rope is oscillated up and down, you could see how the light will actually penetrate the first 2 picket fences that are vertical, but you see how they don't penetrate the horizontal picket fence here. So this is the very definition of polarization. Light is only transmitted in one direction, so it's essentially directionality of the light once it's been polarized. Now this is linear polarization, which most of us are all familiar with. Circular polarization is a little bit different. It actually involves the addition of a quarter wave retarder into the middle of the laminate, which actually turns sine wave like looking light into what you see here, which is more like a corkscrew. And this is what circularly polarized light looks like. So here's an example of what you could do with a polarizer. On the left side, you could see, the sky is just basically overexposed and blown out. There's a lot of haze in the sky, which is what's washing out that blue color. And on the right side, you could see how the sky, is very vivid and comes to life with the polarizer, and you could see the definition between the cloud and the sky. However, not much change at all in the foreground. You could see how the colors of the grass are slightly different, but basically the same. So this is polarizer in the sky, and then the all familiar situation, photographing someone inside a vehicle. You could see how no filter, you have all this scatter or glare, as we call it, on the window. And with the polarizer, you could see how you can basically see right through the car. It's a very effective tool, a necessary tool when you're doing shooting on vehicles. And then water. You could see the shot on the left, how you're getting a great deal of reflections off of the water, because of the light reflecting off and causing a lot of scatter. With the polarizer, you could see, the definition in this duck. If you look at the feathers versus not really being able to see anything here. So a polarizer is a standard tool, for anybody's kit. So Schneider just introduced a second version of what's called a variable neutral density filter. And basically what you're looking at here is, this is the 77 millimeter screw-in version of the filter. And what's actually inside this filter are 2 pieces of glass polarizers. And when you screw this onto the lens and rotate the outer polarizer, you get what's called cross polarization. Now, for this picture, the polarizers are actually crossed, which is why you can't see any light through here. If you were to rotate this by 45 degrees, you would actually see it become uncrossed. And in its uncrossed position, it would be 1.5 stops. In its fully crossed position, it's 11.5. And this is a brand new product that is only about $250 or so. But it's a tool that that is very important to have. It prevents frequent filter changes. All you have to do is just turn the filter and you get pretty much any ND value that you want within that range. So diffusion filters are probably the most popular filters these days. As lenses and cameras get better, the images get too sharp, and you have to find creative ways of making the image look less sharp and more interesting, and more romantic and dreamy, if you like that. So diffusion filters set the mood. You can reduce fine detail. Some of the examples of diffusion filters that I'll go over it shortly. I can tell you what TV shows or movies these filters have been on. Is a long list of feature films and television where our filters have been used, some very much recently. Also, a diffusion filter can be used to reduce contrast or add flare. So Classic Soft, as I stated before, is a filter that we developed back in 2001. And you can see from this illustration how Classic Soft works. So here's a piece of glass, and inside are these what we call micro lenslets. A lenslet is basically a small lens. And each one of these lenslets, it has a diameter of maybe 0.3 millimeters or so. It's very, very small. So if you look at this segment here, E, where light comes in and only sees glass, light passes straight through, okay? But on this letter C here, when light encounters a lenslet, it comes out a little bit differently as light passes through the lens, okay? And it actually causes a defocusing situation, which adds a very, very nice diffusive look. Classic Soft, is still being made very popularly today. As it was, back in 2001, it was revolutionary. This is an example of what Classic Soft does. This is a no filter, and the Classic Soft 2. This is the heaviest version of it. You would probably not want to use a 2 unless you really wanted to take years off of someone's face and make it a more dreamy type of a look. But you can see how features are softened around the face. Yet, if you notice, the eyes are still in focus. So we celebrate Classic Soft to be in focus diffusion, available in 5 different grades, with 1/8 being the weakest, 2 being the strongest, where the 1/4 and the 1/2 are probably the most common. Then we have HD Classic Soft. We changed it to HD because we had to make the lenslets smaller. When we were using film and shooting with Classic Soft, there was very little chance of imaging the lenslets. But when we started moving into high def, there were some circumstances where the actual image would show the lenslet. So HD Classic Soft was our solution to that by giving the same exact effect as you saw in the illustration before, only smaller lenslets, and we shifted the grading down by 1 strength. So HD Classic Soft, for HD or film, very, very commonly used, to take years off of somebody's complexion. Black Frost is a different type of a filter. It has a black particulate. And what this causes is a little bit of a glow to a highlight source. If you're looking for that, it often softens the skin, but also causes a little bit of a flare or glow. And then we have the Holy Grail, which is Hollywood Black Magic. In 5 different strengths. It's actually a hybrid filter between Black Frost and HD Classic Soft. and it was like the chocolate finding the peanut butter, because it has been the most popular filter by far in our product line. And you could see how this would really make digital look just like film. Digicon is a filter that we developed years ago when cameras were challenged for dynamic range. It's not such a popular filter these days, as the cameras nowadays have plenty of dynamic range, 10, 12, 14, 16 stops of dynamic range. But if you want to reduce highlights and raise shadows, Digicon is a filter that is still being used pretty commonly. But we see it becoming less out of favor because the cameras just don't seem to need it that much. In Radiant Soft, we introduced 3 years ago. This was basically Schneider's answer to Glimmer Glass, which is made by Tiffin. The difference between Radiant Soft and Glimmer Glass, Radiant Soft is available in 7 strengths, 7 useful strengths, I might add. And the big difference is in how Radiant Soft handles highlights or hot lights in a set. So you could see with no filter, this is what one of these set lights would look like, and these are planted in the set deliberately. And with the Radiant Soft 2, which is, you're starting to approach the upper end of the set, you could see how there's very little blooming of this highlight. So the difference between a Radiant Soft and a Glimmer Glass is less over blooming, a lot less. A Glimmer Glass, this light would just explode into a giant halo, and if you want that look, then use Glimmer Glass. If you want a more controlled highlight, then Radiant Soft is a filter $150 cheaper than Glimmer Glass. And more effective in circumstances when you want to control highlights. So if anyone's ever heard of a cinematographer putting a lady stocking behind the lens, this is the filter for you. The TrueNet filter is Schneider's technology for actually taking a real stocking and putting it in between glass. This was a technical challenge like I have not seen before. Getting the stretch just right and cementing it in between the glass. It really has been quite revolutionary for those who have always favored pulling a stocking behind the lens. There's no stretching a stocking and having it tear or rip. You don't have to put gaffer's tape to hold the stocking. This is a matte box filter that just sits out, and it gives you that romantic 50s Hollywood look without having to go through the trouble of putting a net behind the lens. They come in 3 colors, black, beige, and gray. Black 1 and 2, the most popular. Beige is a very nice warming net. And gray, if you want to knock down contrast and just give a little bit more haze, like a smoky room or something like that, from, like, say, a pool hall in 1960, this would be the perfect filter for that. So TrueNet's available in 3 colors. By the way, pretty much every filter that I'm showing you available in most sizes that you might need. Okay.
So, Ron, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Thaïs is raising her hand.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that that's actually how I met Ron years ago. And he did some amazing, I don't know if it's going to be possible to show, but he did some amazing different tests of net diffusion, that is different stocks that I wanted sandwiched between glass. And we had so many tests, and he just created some magic here. I know it's so hard to show, but if anybody wants footage with tests with TrueNet, with this beautiful diffusion filters, just get in touch with me, and I would love to know opinions and share some different densities. And, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was quite an enjoyable experience. You know, we, unlike a lot of manufacturers, we are completely open to the custom, to the new idea. And, you know, all it takes is an idea from someone and it turns into a product. You know, this happens quite frequently for us. So yeah, it was our delight to be able to work with you, Thaïs, on that project. So we have about 30 minutes to go. So we're getting toward the end of this. So if everyone would just oblige me, I'm going to go just a little bit quicker. And then we're going to talk about sensational filters, and then we'll open it up to a final Q&A. So if you want to get closer, you know, to your subject, diopters are available in 4 different sizes. Series 9, which is about a 3-inch circle, 4.5, 6-inch, and the more popular 138 millimeter. The 138s, we actually increased the strengths. They used to be half, 1, 2, 3. Now we introduced 3 more strengths, so they're now available in 1/8, 1/4, 3/4, and then you have the half, and then 1, 2, and 3. If anyone is interested in this, I put this in here specifically for educational reasons, but if you ever had a reason to go through the mathematics and try and calculate the focal length of a diopter, I put the formula here as it's very popularly known, and we have to know it to be able to do quality control on the diopters, but the focal length is equal to 1,000 divided by the strength. So an example, a focal length of +2 diopter would be 1,000 divided by the strength, or 2, which is 500 millimeters. Focal length of a +1/2 is 1,000 divided by 1/2, which is 2,000 millimeters. An example of what diopters do, this is a picture of a postage stamp. You could see the no filter, and then the 1, 2, and 3. These also come in split field diopters. All the strengths, again, for the 138 and the Series 9, 4.5, and 6-inch. If you wanted to do a close-up on half the shot, here's an example on the left with no split diopter, and on the right, you can see the split diopter it's a left to right usage here. You can actually see a little bit of the line right here. And in the next shot, you can see it's an up and down. You can see the diopter is like running right through the middle here. So here you could see the base, you know, how it's in focus, and then here the background is out of focus. So split diopters, very, very important tool, particularly when you do product photography. And then we have the True Streak filters. You know, about 8 years ago, Schneider introduced the True Streak, which creates the anamorphic streak effect. If anyone's ever shot with anamorphic and saw the streak, you'll know that it's only a blue streak. That wasn't good enough for us, so we introduced the True Streak in 9 different colors. And if you watch a lot of movie and TV these days, you see all different color streaks that you know were not created anamorphically, but they come in red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, pink, gold, which we introduced 3 years ago. Gold is a magnificent colored streak, especially used you know, on sunlight or on a sunset. Indigo is a brand new color that we're going to be rolling out later this year. It's not in our price list yet, but the indigo is actually present in the rainbow streak, which I'm going to show you a couple slides away. I think this is a very rich, more interesting color than the actual blue. and that's just my opinion, but I know some that agree. And you can see the blue streak tends to be more of like a cyan type blue, where the indigo is a very deep, rich, almost a violet type of a color, and it gives a very, very unique streak and a powerful streak. And the last color, of course, is the total lack of color, which is clear. Clear and blue are the most common streaks in the product line. You know, the blue to replicate an anamorphic streak, and a clear, you know, it just seems to be the next best color. So here's an example of, you know, what a streak filter, you know, a clear filter would look like on colored lights. And this is a close-up of the actual filter itself. And in between the laminate are contained very thin cylindrical lenses that are actually cemented inside the glass, all at different spacings. There's 4 different strengths that are available with streaks based on the spacing. 1 millimeter spacing is the strongest, and 4 would be the weakest. So this is an example of our star filter. We make a 6-point star, red, white, and blue. 4th of July is coming up, and I have a screw-in red, white, and blue from my own camera that I'm going to be taking out to shoot some fireworks. A clear star on colored lights, this is what it would look like. And then there's 2 specialty filters of streaks. We have what's called the confetti, true streak confetti. And what you're looking at here are very small segments of the actual lines that are in the filter. We actually cut them all to the same size, and it has a very strange effect on the light, as you can see on the bottom. This is an example of what a confetti would look like. The confetti really shines when you turn it. There are you know, some filters that have been put into rotating mounts so that you can actually rotate the confetti, and it kind of looks like fireworks. Very unique and also very focal length dependent. You go wide versus long with this, you're going to get 2 completely different effects. And my pride and joy, which is our True Streak Rainbow, actual streak filters laid out in the color of the rainbow. So you can see the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and then it repeats red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet. And then it just goes through many cycles of the rainbow. So depending on focal length and angle of incidence to the filter, you can actually go through a half a cycle of a rainbow or 2 cycles. Down on the bottom is an example of some hot lights at a concert shot with the streak filter. And you can see how one single point source starts out in the orange, goes through yellow, and on the other side, you know, you have the indigo and the violet. So very, very interesting filter, limitless capabilities depending on what kind of lights and focal length you use. And this is an illustration of the instrumentation that we use in our laboratory. This is my spectrophotometer. This is how we measure all the color and generate the XY coordinates that I discussed before. Everything is computer controlled. This is our interferometer, which is a machine that measures the flatness of the glass. Every optic that we make is ground and polished on both surfaces to achieve what's called plane parallelism, plane, P-L-A-N-E, where both surfaces are parallel to one another. This is very important when putting the filter on a long lens. You don't want to have any aberrations or any resolution loss. And you could see the hands of one of our optical inspectors looking at a filter in a 100 watt light bulb, which is a very, very bright light. It's a very particular inspection, and only the best of the A-stock filters get to hit the shelf. So using filters will help you gain and maintain a competitive edge, maintain your vision through post-production to the final result, save you time and money, Take advantage of having the real world as your source material. And visit schneiderkreuznach.com. Find us on Facebook. And we're also on Twitter and Instagram. If anyone would like to follow me on Instagram, I frequently put filters, brand new filters, the same day they come out of the lab on Instagram. I shouldn't do that, but I do it so that you can see what's coming out of our lab. We have 20 new products in R&D right now, so enough filter for several years of new production. So I'd like to open it up to some product Q&A.
Yes. Well, thank you for that. That was an amazing presentation.
Thank you.
I will start with a question from Mateus Curi. He is a DIT. So his question is, how often do you repeat those tests to keep the production line consistent?
Okay. Every single lot of filters is tested. If we're talking about neutral density filters, every single one hits the spectrophotometer, and there's a pass or fail. Okay, and that pass or fail, as I showed you before, was it has to fit inside my ellipse. Okay. As far as every other filter besides neutral density, the process is a very repetitive one. There's a lot of particulates that come into place with the diffusion filters, and all the diffusion filters are made with a balance that measures a milligram of particle to 3 decimal points. Very, very high precision weighing out of these particles. We have various colors that we have that Schneider makes. There's probably 7 or 8 different colored filters that we make of 3 different kinds of blues. They're not really in the presentation just to cut down on the length of it, but those all go through tri-stimulus testing as well, and there's a separate ellipse for those filters as well. So the quality control is done on every lot, not necessarily every single filter, particularly on the rhodiums, because 50 of them get done at one time. So in the coating chamber, you couldn't have one be a different color than the other because they all see the same chemistry. So they're lot tested, to answer that.
Okay. There's a good question here, and I think this is related to the last question from Caio Mazzilli.
Mm-hmm.
He asks, if the Schneider filters are tested with different types of lenses and also different brands, and then he continues his question, do they cause any noticeable changes testing with vectorscope from lens to lens?
No, well, I'll answer the last part of that first. When you calibrate your vectorscope test, after you're looking at your grade card, with your camera looking through the lens, you always want to do a white balance, because you want to white balance out the gray card. You want to white balance out the lens. Everything that takes place within that end-to-end test, would have to be brought into calibration. So this is where the white balance comes into place. However, once that white balance is established, you do not want to white balance again, because now you're basically cheating the test. Once you white balance the first time, you leave it, and then every filter that goes in after that will be represented accurately in the color shift that's present.
Yeah, that test that we saw, it was made 6,500 Kelvin color temperature, right? So
yes.
there's a question here from Junior. He asks, the best result. Do you have this study with different temperature colors? I mean,
no.
he means if it have some significant difference.
No, the 6500 is just a choice.
Oh, okay.
It's a choice, and anybody who measures optical color uses 6500 as a standard. Okay, if I wanted to calibrate my spectrophotometer for D5500, right, I would get the same result because the light is all relative. So D6500 is a choice. It's not mandatory. It's just a common choice that is used. And I know that it's 6500 because it's calibrated inside the machine. So the results of the XY chart is all based on 6500.
Okay. There's a question from Bruno Matrubashi.
Okay.
He asks, how do you see the technical improvement from the manufacturer's internal NDs? How do you see the internal NDs from nowadays? Because Arri Alexa has internal NDs, Sony cameras has it, Canon camera has it. I don't know why Red cameras doesn't have it already, but how do you see these?
Yeah, Red's working on an internal ND. I've been talking with a third-party company about putting rhodiums inside a Red camera. It's still very much in its infancy right now, but you know, the ARRI has a set of full spectrum NDs. I forget what they call them, but you know, ARRI has a set. A lot of manufacturers have a set of full spectrum NDs, so they put their own NDs into the camera. Are they any better than a rhodium? I haven't actually tested internal cameras, but I know that the Mapbox cameras, the Mapbox filters rather, you know, from whether it be ARRI or Lee or Mitomo or you know all of those manufacturers, you know they're all reasonably comparable, you know, to the Schneider. I think ours are a little bit neutral. I have tested the Mapbox filters. The big difference with the Schneider is that the coatings are on the inside of the glass, where some of the other manufacturers haven't figured out how to do that yet. And a filter with a coating on the outside of the glass just won't survive. So internal NDs is actually you know, taking away our business. And I would love for a camera manufacturer to, you know, to come to us and say, okay, you know, these tiny little filters that go in the camera, you know, we'd like to make them rhodiums. But, you know, we haven't had that opportunity yet. But I suspect that, you know, it'll happen eventually.
Well, there is not a relationship yeah, so there is not a relationship from you to any camera manufacturers yet.
No, not at this time.
Okay, next question from Gustavo Fattori. He says he's a camera assistant and he asks, sometimes after some hours shooting under the tropical sun, our NDs and effect filters became hot, almost at hand burning situation.
Mm-hmm.
As we worry about their performance through the years, please tell us about their efficiency on color shift and other features and its relations with set hours temperature, the high temperatures or low temperatures. So how do you see this?
Okay, well, there's two different factors involved here when you talk about heat. It's the heat's ability to shift the color, and it's the heat's ability of compromising the lamination itself. Remember, the laminated filters are put together with some sort of adhesive in between, and inside of that adhesive is where everything takes place. You know, the ND is there, the lenslets are there, the black frost is there, the streak filaments, you know, the streak lenses are there. Everything takes place on the inside. So, you know, we test our filters at 140 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
This is quite hot. And, you know, I'm a chemist, so, you know, remember by trade. So I handle lots of things that are hot in the past in the laboratory. And I know for a fact that 140 degrees, you can't hold it. All right. 140 is beyond what our skin could handle. So our heat test is meant to mimic a filter sitting in a car or a truck in Death Valley, where it could be 120 degrees air temperature and probably hotter than that in the car itself. So I would say 140 degrees above, it starts to get into a precarious situation where the filter might not be able to withstand the heat. Now, that isn't true with the rhodium filter, though, because it's made with a coating and it's made with a cement that is cured under ultraviolet, so the filter can't come apart with the heat. Also, all of our filters have what's called a UV absorber in the formulation, an ultraviolet absorber. And what that does is it prevents the transmission of infrared into the filter, which could cause it to fade. We've had an ultraviolet absorber in our filters right since the first day. That was one of the first components that I had to work on, because remember, a lot of the filters are made with dyes, and dyes fade. Okay, and to prevent that fading, you put an ultraviolet absorber into the formulation, and you don't get a fading problem.
Okay, so they're good enough for this very high temperature.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it in a microwave.
Yes. Well, next question, Pedro Godoy. This is a very specific question. He asks, does the neutrality target in the CIE 1931 has any significant change when we talk about different size gamuts? If it does, how that interfere the filtering manufacture process? This is a difficult one.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with the different gamuts, and they're changing. They are changing all the time. But what's important to realize about that is while the gamut increases as you could see more color, you know, the triangle that I showed you inside 1931 is probably an older version. And if you would look at today's, we're seeing more color now in monitors, on televisions, through the camera, more better, you know, more vivid color. But the fact of the matter is neutral light is still neutral light. Okay, so I don't expect to have any change regardless of the gamut. You know, D65 is still going to be the same. It's still going to have the same integrity no matter what the gamut is.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if Thaïs have some questions, or if she would like to read some questions too.
I think we have 5 minutes.
Yeah, we
I
have a
think
few
you're
more.
doing great, and I see some of the questions that are coming up that are my particular questions, like for example the lighthouse. So just keep going. I'm really enjoying here.
Yeah, I happen to notice a question here from Bonnie Conteville saying, does Schneider have plans on electronic NDs? Thinking about depth of field effects and how to do them. My answer to that is I have seen the electronic ND that Panavision made. I saw it 2 years ago at Cinegear, and I'm intrigued by it. I do see one major flaw with it. It's by use of crystals, and anytime you put crystals in the optical path, you're going to get some kind of diffusion. This is the very fundamental of diffusion. You know, it's something to interfere with the light. Okay, black frost, locon. These filters are all crystalline particles that are in the light path. So I would like to do it one day. I'm thinking about the new ND all the time. But honestly, I think the matte box ND, not the grad, but the solid ND is going to completely disappear one day. because every camera will have ND, and a solid ND may never sell again. So I don't think it's worth the investment to try and figure it out. But I think about it all the time.
Yeah. Well, we're going. We have already 3 minutes left for our for the ending of our webinar. We have a question here from Juliana. Ron, could you please tell a little bit for us, how is this process when someone asks to you for a new filter, for a new specific innovation or effect? How is this process when you start from the beginning of an idea of someone?
Well, it's usually one of two ways. It's either a person, like Thaïs, coming to me and saying, hey, what if you put this in between the glass? What would it do? Can you do that? And then we have to think about it. Okay, can we put this into the cement, and can we laminate this? The filters have to be laminated, otherwise they're not going to be stable. And also you have to grind and polish them, otherwise they're not going to perform very well. So it's either someone coming to you and saying, what if you did this? Or the second option is someone says, I want to create this effect. I want to create this flare that's bigger on the left than it is on the right, or something like that. Do you have any ideas on how to do that? So this is the two angles that this is brought to me with. When someone says, like Thaïs, can you take a stocking and put it in between the glass? Well, we never did it, but we could try it. Or the most difficult one is when someone says, I want to create the effect. How can you do it optically? But in both cases, yeah, go ahead.
This is something that also Ron created for me, and he completely designed it from scratch, from this idea of wanting an effect, and he presented a tool to do this effect. He just created, he did the design from scratch to enable us to get a specific effect.
Okay. What filter is that, Thaïs? It's a little out of focus.
It's the birthday filter.
Oh, the birthday filter. By the way, if anyone wants to go on YouTube and search for the birthday filter, you can find it on YouTube and see what it does. It's phenomenal. But to summarize, when it comes to custom filters, a lot of times I turn it away because it isn't a good business decision. While we like to go in the lab and play, the amount of time that I put into it versus what you can sell it for, it ultimately has to be a business decision. And, I can't go to the people that I answer to and say, I spent 12 hours in the lab to sell a $200 filter. It has to be a business decision at the same time.
It's 5 o'clock.
Nice. Well, we reached the end of our webinar. So I would like to thank you a lot for this presentation, for this conversation, and this sharing of information that was so valuable. And I would like to remember our audience that next week we will have more webinars. So please tune in on Instagram accounts of Bucareste and ACASP for more information. And well, see you soon. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Thaïs.
Very much my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, guys. Really, really thank you. Obrigada.
You're welcome, Luisa. You're welcome, Pedro. I see it. The thank yous coming in. You're welcome, Natalia. You're welcome, Joao. Junior. God bless.
Thank you. I hope to see you soon.
You bet. Bye, everybody.
Bye.